An ambulance pulls up outside Riverside General on a night that looks like any other. Nothing dramatic, just the usual rush of cold air and tired staff waiting for whatever comes next. On the stretcher is a 31-year-old woman who isn't talking, isn't tracking anyone, and barely reacts when they move her inside. Within minutes, 3 nurses go down, one after another, like someone cut the strings holding them upright. No warning, no pattern, just bodies hitting the floor. One of them will wake up in the ICU with a splitting headache and absolutely no idea how she ended up there. And the truth is, nobody in that building, not the doctors, not the paramedics, not the poor bastard running triage, has even the faintest clue that Riverside is about to walk straight into one of the strangest medical cases in American history. Her name is Gloria Ramirez, and by the time she hits Riverside General, her body's already lost the argument. Gloria grows up in Riverside, California, in the kind of neighborhood where people remember who shoveled whose driveway last winter. Not because anyone is keeping score out loud, but because that's how the place keeps track of who shows up when it matters. Not fancy, not rough, just a stretch of streets where people help when it makes sense, and quietly disappear back into their own lives when it doesn't. She's the kid who ends up watching the neighbours' toddlers for free because their mum's shift runs late, and nobody else thought to ask what she needed. She doesn't make a speech about it, she just shows up, and then she goes home. She marries young, David, a man who does his best and doesn't dramatise it. They build the usual life, first a rental, then a mortgage, kids, bills, and a long row of days that look ordinary on the surface, until you realise how fast they vanish once something comes along to take them away. Then 1993 rolls in like a bad season that forgets how to leave. She starts feeling a kind of exhaustion that doesn't listen to sleep, and pain that doesn't bother to follow any pattern she recognises. At first she calls it stress, a long week, too much to do. Then it keeps going. Doctors run tests. Then they run more. Scans, blood work, biopsies. The whole slow ritual you only understand if you've sat in that chair before. Eventually the result lands, hard and simple, late-stage cervical cancer. Not the kind you negotiate with, not the kind you walk away from. There's no speech, no collapse in the hallway. She listens, nods, signs what needs signing, and then gets in the car and drives herself home. She keeps life moving for as long as her body lets her. She packs school lunches, she pays bills, she zips her daughter's jackets on cold mornings, straightens backpacks, answers small questions about homework, and big ones about nothing at all. All the quiet, repetitive work that never makes headlines, but tells you everything you need to know about who someone is. Radiation chips away at her in pieces. Appetite first, then strength, then colour, then the thin layer of pretending that lets people say, "I'm fine," with a straight face. And eventually she runs out of room to hide what's happening. February 9th, evening, a regular night on paper. Then Gloria goes down without warning. No stumble, no reaching for a chair. Just gone. Like somebody cut the power to the room and forgot to warn the occupant. Her breathing turns rough and uneven. Her limbs jerk without rhythm, and her eyes look straight past the walls like the world has slid out of focus. David calls 911 because there's nothing left in the house that can fix this. The paramedics come in fast, carrying the kind of tired focus you only see in people who know exactly how bad a minute can get. They do what they always do. Oxygen, lines, vitals, voice steady, hand steady, because somebody in the room has to stay calm while everyone else is falling apart on the inside. They load her into the ambulance and head for Riverside General. From the outside it looks like a hard case in a life that has already had more than enough of them. Nothing about that ride says the night is about to go off the rails, but it is. 8:15 p.m. Riverside's emergency room is doing its usual bad magic trick. Too many patients, not enough staff, too much noise, and everyone pretending this is just how things are supposed to be. Gloria arrives barely conscious, breathing unevenly, skin washed out in a way ER staff recognise on sight. They move her onto a bed, hook up oxygen, push seizure medication, start fluid. The room finds its rhythm, monitors, quiet orders, the low hum of people who've done this too many times to count. On paper, it's straightforward. End-stage cancer flare, messy and serious, but well inside the territory this ER knows how to walk through. They've seen worse. They think they know what kind of night this is going to be. Nurse Susan Kane steps up to draw blood. Routine. She's done it half asleep on nights she doesn't remember. This is the part of the job nobody writes stories about. She fills the syringe, tips the vial to check the sample, and then something in her face tightens. Not theatrically, not for anyone else's benefit, just a small, sharp recognition that something here isn't right. There's a smell. Sharp. Chemical. Ammonia. The kind that cuts through whatever else you thought you were smelling. And the blood doesn't look like it got the memo on how blood is supposed to behave. It's cloudy, with tiny yellow flecks drifting in it, like they arrive from another story. She hands the sample to Dr. Julie Gorczynski. Julie leans in, turns it in the light, frowns the kind of frown that says, "I don't like this," long before the words catch up. She calls over Dr. Humberto Ochoa, the attending. People in charge develop a sense for when a room quietly shifts on them, even if nobody has said a word yet. Kane goes down first, no warning, no "I don't feel so good," just a sudden cut to black, like someone unplugged her from the scene. 1 second she's there, the next she's on the floor. Another nurse starts vomiting, violent and sudden, body folding in on itself as if it's trying to get away from something it can't see. Beside the bed, a third nurse crumples just as fast, like whatever hit the first two has started working its way across the room. Metal crashes against tile, voices spike and tangle. For a moment there is no order, just movement, instinct running ahead of thought. Someone starts pushing patients toward the exit. Others drag gurneys into the hallway, then out through the doors into the cold February air. Staff strip off their clothing and shove it into hazardous waste bags with shaking hands, because nobody knows what's spreading, only that they don't want to take it home. Inside, the ER feels wrong, too quiet for a place built on constant noise. Only a handful of staff stay with Gloria, sealed into full protective suits, masks fogging, trying to work through layers of plastic and fear. At 8:50 p.m, after cycles of compressions and drugs that never quite bring her back, Gloria Ramirez is pronounced dead. Kidney failure, cardiac arrhythmia. The kind of official line that fits the chart and doesn't even begin to touch the night. The story should end there, but it doesn't, because whatever was in that room didn't stop with Gloria. 23 staff members develop symptoms. Not vague complaints, not "I feel a bit off," but real, measurable problems. Shortness of breath, dizziness, numbness, temporary paralysis, confusion that settles behind the eyes like frost on glass. 5 of them are sick enough to need hospitalization. Dr. Julie Gorczynski ends up in the ICU she normally rounds through in the opposite direction. She spends 2 weeks there. Her bone marrow stops doing its job, like someone quietly shut down the factory and forgot to tell the rest of the building. Nerve damage follows, the kind that doesn't listen to time or optimism. She survives, but she does not walk back into her life as the same version of herself. The autopsy team opens Gloria's body expecting something loud enough to explain all of this. A toxin, a chemical trail, a piece of evidence that points in a single, clean direction. They know what they're hoping to find, even if they won't say it out loud. They don't get it. No poisons, no radiation, no obvious trigger hiding in the organs. Just a body that died the way her medical chart suggests it might have, and a hospital full of people whose symptoms don't fit that simple story. The scalpel work is clean, the answers are not. So the search moves outward. They test the air, they test the surfaces, they track down disinfectants, medication trays, chemical storage rooms, anything with a label and a safety sheet. They crawl through the ventilation system on paper. Nothing pins itself to what happened in that room. Eventually, the official explanation arrives, neat and bloodless: mass hysteria. The idea that the staff weren't poisoned at all. They simply panicked, their bodies folding under stress and suggestion. It looks tidy in a report. On the ground, it doesn't land. The people who collapsed that night know the difference between fear and whatever hit them. Some file legal complaints. Most just file the explanation away in the same mental drawer as bad jokes and cheap bandages. A year later, a different explanation comes along. Toxicologist Brian Anderson, working out of Livermore National Laboratory, starts looking at Gloria's case from a chemist's point of view. He focuses on DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide, a solvent-turned-folk remedy that back then you could buy in health food stores if you knew what you were asking for. Athletes used it, people with chronic pain used it. It lived in that grey space between miracle and mistake. Lab tests on Gloria's sample show small amounts of dimethyl sulfone, a breakdown product of DMSO. From there, Anderson builds his theory that Gloria had been using DMSO for pain that it accumulated in her body, and that under hospital condition, with oxygen flowing and everything else in play, it transformed into dimethyl sulfate, a nerve agent capable of wrecking lungs and nervous systems at very low doses. On paper it lines up. Dimethyl sulfate causes the kind of symptoms the staff described: difficulty breathing, burning in the airways, neurological problems. The match is uncomfortably close. But chemistry isn't a story that exists just because it's elegant. Dimethyl sulfate usually needs heat, catalysts and industrial setups to appear. The kind of environment you find in specialized plants, not in an emergency room with bad coffee and fluorescent lights. Gloria's family says she never used DMSO. No one finds a bottle in her belongings. The autopsy doesn't show clear, direct evidence, only faint chemical footprints that could mean several different things. The Livermore hypothesis ends up in the journals, picked over in conferences and back rooms. Strong on theory, weak on proof. It stays on the table but never quite takes the centre. Years pass. The story refuses to stay buried. Then another theory surfaces, this time from a different direction entirely: New Times magazine. Riverside County in the early 90s wasn't just a place with sunshine and tract housing. It was one of the busiest methamphetamine production zones in the United States. Hidden labs, chemicals moving around in ways that never see a receipt. This theory says methylamine, an industrial chemical and a key ingredient in meth production, might have found its way into Gloria's IV line, not as part of any treatment plan, but as collateral damage. According to the story, someone inside the hospital was stealing methylamine and hiding it in IV bags for later collection. One bag disappears. One bag comes back. The wrong bag gets returned to storage and eventually ends up connected to Gloria's line. Methylamine, when it hits oxygen, can turn into a gas that burns the lungs and hits fast. It could explain the sharp smell, the sudden collapse of the staff, and the lack of clear residue in her blood afterward. Fast in, fast out, leaving very little behind. It's a clean narrative, almost too clean, and like the others, it never gets the one thing it needs most: proof. March 1994. Gloria Ramirez is buried in a sealed metal casket. The funeral is small. Family, a few close friends, people who knew her as a person long before she became a headline. Her daughters stand by the graveside, trying to hold themselves together the way children do when the world takes something they don't have words for. There are no answers handed to them, no final report that makes sense of what happened in that emergency room. Riverside updates its safety protocols. Other hospitals quietly do the same. Somewhere far from the front pages, scientists and physicians keep arguing about what happened to Gloria. In conferences, in papers, in late-night conversations over coffee that's been sitting on the burner too long. Every theory gets its moment. Every theory cracks somewhere along the edges. No explanation, chemical, psychological, or criminal, manages to close every gap. But one thing doesn't move. Something happened in that ER on that February night that medicine still can't file away under solved. There's a point where medicine stops pretending it has an answer, and the people left behind have to live with whatever remains. Riverside hit that point on a cold February night in 1994, and the truth is, whatever moved through that emergency room, whatever dropped trained professionals to the floor and left others looking over their shoulders for years, didn't leave a neat signature behind. Some cases close, some fade, and some just keep breathing in the dark, long after the body that started them is gone.